I think I don't know why I've like got this irrational hate of it's like when Jon Stewart just
You
hated
do.
Arby's for like
Th-
a year. Um but
This this is one
yeah,
of your hot takes is going against Cameron now.
yeah, this is devolving into just crapping on a peak, but
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach Pinky swears with me to hike together sometime in 2025. I take issue with a peak being sorely neglected, and we discuss a few current issues with the Colorado mountains, and we share some of our New Year's resolutions. So, Zach, we're gonna kick off the new year right by working through some New Year's resolutions for the two of us and maybe a couple of hot takes in there too. But how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Eric. It's cool now. Oklahoma never gets cold. I mean, I was still able to go for a bike ride at 7 this morning, which meant that it's not that cold. It's nice. The holiday season is upon us. I like that. We've received some really kind emails from listeners, and it's so cool to hear from people. It's so great to hear that people are listening and enjoying it. I'm in a world where most of my contact, if I know someone has heard me because they're sitting in front of me, and as a teacher, as a professor, that's
Yep.
how I know how to communicate. And so it's so weird to think that there are people out there listening to this that I may never see or meet, and may never see or meet me.
Mm,
So what a weird but fun and amazing medium this is. So how are you,
it
Eric?
is. I agreed. I'm doing well. Yeah, we're in the 30s temperature wise, and I actually went for a run this morning. So I got a few
That's
miles in.
brisk.
It was brisk. I had to put on a hat and some light gloves, but that was all right. The sun was out, so that helped, and it was good to kind of get out, even though it was chilly, and get a good run in. So yeah, we're doing well.
Excellent. As you said, we've decided to do some New Year's resolutions here and some hiking related things. But before that, I think there's a few things on our mind today that we wanted to
Mm.
get off our chest, as it were. So, Eric, I've heard a couple of yours, and I'm excited to talk about them. So, what are some of the things that, as Peter Griffin would say, are grinding your gears?
Yeah, there's another impression you've done. There it is, the Peter Griffin
Boy,
grinding my
Quagmire, I
gears.
don't know if you've had that apple pie, but it is tasty. What's going on in your world?
Well, so I do have two things. One is maybe a bit of a gear grinder, but the other one is more, I guess, more of a plea that kind of comes from a hike that my son Ty and I did this summer. So we summited Mount Edwards, which is a Centennial 13er in the Front Range. There's multiple ways to summit Mount Edwards. You could come from the south and get there from Argentine Pass, but the way that we did it was actually through Guanella Pass and up to Waldorf Mine is what it's called. And from there,
Hmm.
it's actually not that long of a hike, but there's a couple of pleas that I have for those that are interested in hiking Mount Edwards, and I would suggest hiking it. It's a really cool mountain, and for one of the reasons that I'm about to mention. So, one of my pleas is be very careful if when you're on Guanella Pass looking for the turnoff, the route description on 14ers.com says that it's signed. I don't think that it is. I never found a sign for the turnoff. I had to kind of calculate how far we were supposed to go and then kind of guess on where the turnoff is and eventually got it right. But I would say be very careful on Guanella Pass if you're going to go that way. And I would also say that the road that goes from Guanella Pass to the Waldorf mine, it's kind of long. And at the very beginning, it's really rocky and really bumpy. And four-wheel drive is required. And I would say high clearance is required. I tried getting over a couple of big rocks in the beginning and I failed and I went back and I tried again to get momentum and I failed. And eventually Ty said, Dad, maybe you shouldn't be doing this. You might get in some trouble. And I said, Yeah, you're right. But then I tried one more time and that last time I actually got over it and then was able to drive up the rest of the way. It is long. It would be really tempting for those without clearance to try to do what I did and push it. I wouldn't recommend pushing it. I really should not have done that. But regardless of how you get to the Waldorf mine, once you get there, you park at the mine and you kind of walk up a little bit further and then you turn off to the right and you can see this. It's a false summit in the distance. It's pretty clear to see. And here's where my other plea comes in. The reason I think it's worth going this way is as you get up to that false summit, once you get there, it's not far at all to the true summit of Edwards.
Mhm.
But somewhere after you get to that false summit, as you're going up, you will be smacked with just this beautiful, striking view of Torrey's Peak. So Grays and Torreys are just west of Edwards. You can actually get to Grays from Edwards. There's like this nasty class 4, I think, ridge that you can
Yeah.
take from Edwards to Grays if you want to go that way. I wouldn't recommend it based on what I saw, but it is doable for those that are so inclined. But as you look off to your right, you'll see Torrey's Peak, and it's close enough to where it almost looks like you could reach out and touch it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so prominent, it's so striking in that view. I've not seen a view like that in a long time. And we've talked about, Sunshine and Red Cloud. You and I tackle those this summer. The view from both of those peaks is just amazing because there's so many mountains around. This Edwards view of Torrey's is just, it's stunning. And I think it's worth it for anyone that is interested in a beautiful view. I think it's amazing. So I would recommend that to anybody. So it's not a gear grinder, but it's something that I've been thinking of recently. It's a really cool view.
Well, I mean, we could turn it into a gear grinder. Let's get some signage off Guanella Pass, people. Come on now. Um,
Help
yeah,
Edwards out.
there's different kinds of good views, right? Like there's that
hmm
kind where it's like you're presented with this really great view of a classic mountain, probably parallel to like a lot of the views in the Sangre de Cristos that look right onto the Needles section of that range. And like
mm
the view from Mount
hmm
Adams is like gorgeous mountains. And then there's the big
mm
expansive views of like Sunshine and Red Clouds. So when I did Edwards from Argentine Pass, the views there are quite good as well. And the road is a little
mm.
better, but it sounds to me like from what you're saying, the approach has a lot of views too. And so that may make this one really rewarding if you don't destroy your car getting up the first 100 yards or so
Yeah.
of the road. I mean, that's quite the caveat, you
Yeah.
know. If you don't rip out the undercarriage, this is a great place to go.
Right.
So that's awesome. That's we can tuck that away not in the grinder gear segment, but in the sincere advice from Eric, like deep thoughts from Eric Fredrickson.
That's right. So what have you got for us, Zach, as
Well,
far as a hot take?
I do have a curmudgeonly take on something here. I say this sometimes they say it's good to vent with no
Mm.
constructive opinion whatsoever. So take this in the spirit of I'm not offering anything constructive, but I have noticed, probably like many hikers, the advent of more permitting and I guess kind of
Ah.
front gating or firewalling of certain really popular places. So the three that I'm thinking of, the first place I saw this was the Maroon Bells, where there's a permit system.
Yep.
Now there's ways to flout that if you get there super late or super early, you can kind of go around it. There's obviously the one that's quite famous right now, which is Quandary Peak, where you have to park your car at a different lot and they're kind of throttling the number of people that can go to that. There's Ice Lake in the San Juans where it got made kind of insta famous and thus kind of overwhelmed by visitors. I foresee this coming in a bunch of places as these mountains get more and more popular. I understand there was a dip in visitation to 14ers this year, but I don't see that trend holding as more and more people make this a kind of pursuit. And because it's been made more and more easy, I see this certain areas are probably going to have permits. Like I said, I don't have anything constructive to offer here, but I do mourn the days of spontaneity where you could say,
Yeah.
maybe you're shooting for one of the lesser known 10 miler mosquito peaks, or maybe you were going to try to do a peak in the Gore range and the weather doesn't work out or your alarm didn't go off in time and you're like, I'd just like to go to Quandary. Well, no, that's not how it's
Mm-hmm.
going to work for you today. Or maybe
Yep.
you were in the San Juans and we're just like, man, this ice lake looks cool. No, you can't do that either. You didn't go online and
No.
get your permit in advance. And there's a certain kind of spontaneity to hiking that I enjoy. For me, probably what makes me most sad, it's symptomatic of the fact that these places are really getting overwhelmed by visitation. Alpine environments are really, really slow to recover, and it means that these areas are getting denuded, and in often cases, a lot of erosion is going on. I'm sad. I don't have anything like I don't have some grand solution. I mean, the solution on an individual basis is go to the places where the people aren't. And if you want to go to the popular places, go in the off season. Go
Mm-hmm.
this time of year or go in late fall to a lot of these places. But for some of us, it's not possible. So I know this is probably coming for a bunch of places and I understand why it's going on. But dang, I miss the good old days where you could kind of even go to these popular places and have the place to yourself. I remember as a kid going to
Mm-hmm.
Ice Lake with my dad, and it wasn't Insta famous yet. And like, there wasn't a trail. I remember hiking Quandary Peak with a friend of mine 20 something years ago and didn't see anybody the whole day in the middle of the summer.
Hmm.
I think those days have maybe passed us. So, anyway, I had to get that out. We may need to do a whole episode on that at some point on some of the issues and maybe even try to have a guest on who can explain some of these issues in better clarity to us. But
Yeah, I don't want to sadden you even more, Zach, but I would add the Decalibron to the list. It's got a waiver for a different reason, but
mm-hmm.
that's a similar situation where you really shouldn't be on there, and legally you can't be on there if you don't sign a waiver ahead of doing that hike. So I love your mention of Quandary too. I mean, I hiked it after hiking Grays and Torreys one morning, and I spontaneously had enough time to where I just decided, well, I'll just do Quandary too. I can't do that anymore. That's not an option for anyone that is goofy enough like me to want to try and pull that off. So I agree with you. The regulations are, I guess, a little bit stifling for the spontaneity of wanting to just enjoy a hike in the mountains. And it's a few places now, but I agree with you. I can see it coming where it's going to be more and more, and that's just going to make it harder for us to enjoy the adventure of being in the mountains.
I
So,
can see the aforementioned Grays and Tories certainly falling prey to that.
oh yeah.
There is a kind of ideal that we have about the mountains that they are free and unencumbered, and that when we're in them, we're free and unencumbered. And
Yeah.
a permitting system, by definition, is not free and unencumbered. It's a pain. It's a bureaucratic
Yep.
hurdle that I don't want to have to
Mm-hmm.
necessarily go through. So it's my big one. But we're gonna get hopeful in a minute with our resolutions. But I had to say that because it's been on my mind lately, and not sure what to do about it. In fact, I'm a wilderness advocate, and it may be a necessary evil, but I wish it wasn't.
Yep. Totally agree.
All right, Eric, I know you've got one more for us, so hit us.
So I may have made a mistake, Zach. So when I woke up this morning, I knew that you and I were going to talk about hot takes, and I had the Edwards hot take in my mind, but I think I may have made a mistake. And so I got online and I went to a website that I love. It combines a couple of things that I love, the mountains and data and numbers. And so that website is Lists of John. Many
Oh,
of our listeners are going to be familiar with that.
yep.
Yeah.
That is a
So
place
Lists
where
of
type A
John.
personalities and the mountains meet.
Yeah, exactly. Those of us that are flawed that way, just I think we maybe we drift there. But so for those not familiar, Lists of John is run by John Kirk, a very accomplished mountaineer who's summited thousands and thousands of peaks, and it's an authority, maybe even the authority, for finding accurate information on what the summit elevations are for the Colorado mountains, and it goes even down to like fivers, and so there's a ton of data on this website, and it lists elevations as well as prominence. And so, not just what we see on our maps, but also what's been measured more recently by LiDAR. And so, all of this information is on this website. And so, I wandered over there this morning and I noticed something I hadn't seen before, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I was looking at the bicentennials, the top 200, and listed on there was a point that intrigued me. It was the Hunter Frying Pan Wilderness High Point. And I said, that's cool. Where is that? I wasn't familiar with this high point. Do you happen to know, Zach, what the alternate name for that point is on Lists of John?
Well,
What
I
what
do,
else they call
but
that
it's
point?
because we talked on the phone before we had this conversation. I mean, immediately when my mind goes to Hunter Frying Pan Wilderness, I would think of there's a bunch of 13ers in there along a couple
Hmm.
ridge lines that top out at like 13.3, 13.4. I know
Including
what,
Oklahoma.
yeah, including Oklahoma. I know what butts up against. So like, yeah, K2, I think Deer Mountain is part of it.
Yep.
Geisler Mountain, all
Hmm.
those guys. But I know it butts up against the massive Massif. So,
Massif. Yep.
are you where are we going here, Eric?
So that high point is also known as Northwest Massive. And as soon as I saw that, it got me thinking more about a topic that longtime 14er aficionados may think that this is a dead horse to get beat. Those that are not as long time may not even be familiar with this. But so in the massive Massif, as you mentioned, there are several points that are above 14,000 feet. Now, none of them have the requisite 300 feet of vertical prominence needed to become an official 14er.
Mm-hmm.
That's, to me, that's very clear, and that makes perfect sense. There are two of those points, North Massive and South Massive, that are well above 14,000 feet. They're below 300 feet of vertical prominence, but they're both above 250. So they're kind of in this kind of gray area where they don't meet the criteria, which is understood, but they're pretty close. North Massive in particular is much higher and much more prominent than many of the other 14,000 peaks that are in Colorado. And if you look on Lists of John, North Massive is actually the sixth highest point in the entire state.
It's like
If it was just
14,300 something, right?
23 plus,
Yeah.
yeah. And its prominence is 274. So if it had 26 feet more of elevation, it wouldn't just be like untalked about. Like very few people that I've ever encountered have even referred to North Massive. But if it was just a little bit taller, it would be an official 14er.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's not. It makes sense, understood. But if we look at kind of this gray area of the five 14ers that are unranked but named, North Massive overshadows all of them. In those five, I'm referencing, and most people probably very familiar with El Diente, North Eolus, Cameron, Challenger, and Conundrum. They're all above 14,000 feet. They're all shy of the 300 feet of prominence. But according to 14ers.com, because they all have an official name with the U.S. Geological Survey, we all count them. If we summon
And
them, we're going to count them.
and if you look at
North
people's
Massive,
lists, like they will say they haven't done all the 14ers until they've done those ones, right?
exactly. Those are on people's lists for sure. North Massive and South Massive, no one ever talks about them. And it made me wonder when I summited Massive many years ago with my buddy Anthony, he and I went through the Southwest route and I think we got to the saddle between South Massive and Massive. And for a split second, I had to look both ways and say, which one is it? Like both of
Mm-hmm.
these are just behemoths. These are both huge. And we went the right way. We went north and got to a peak and thought, oh, is this the summit? And no, it's not. We're still too far south of the summit. So we had to keep going and go north. And eventually we got to the real summit. So It just tells you how expansive this massif is. But I've seen South Massive, and it's huge. Like, and the
Hmm.
saddle, it may not be 300 feet, but it's really close. You've summited North Massive. Like,
Yep.
it makes me wonder, has no one ever tried to apply for a formal name with the government for North Massive?
That's
And
what
if
it
not,
takes.
why? Yeah, like that's what it takes. But has that not been done before? I'm guessing that some people don't want that because now all of a sudden you would have 59 peaks, and some people that are finishers would say, oh, no, I can't call myself a finisher now because there's this extra peak that I haven't done yet. I'm not in the business of wanting to make people do anything like that, but it just confounds me that this very prominent peak in many ways in the state is just not recognized by hardly anybody. And again, you've been to the summit. I haven't, but I'm guessing it's just underrepresented and people just don't give it a second thought. I don't know. Maybe I'm marking up the wrong tree, Zach, but that it just confounds me that a peak of that stature is not recognized by anyone.
You're coming in hot here, Eric, but this is what I'm here for. I think you're dead right. I mean, when you think about, so I've done Challenger, I've done Conundrum, I've done Cameron, I haven't done
Hmm.
North Elis. I've tried El Diente, and there's got to be some middle ground in there for peaks like El Diente that are not technically 14ers. There are no easy
Hmm.
routes up El Diente, and I think that makes it worthy of it. Cameron, you know my feelings on Cameron. I really I didn't even know I had summited when I did it. I was like, oh that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but North Massive is harder than Massive. And I know that's not
Mm.
like a technical argument for it being a ranked peak, but I don't know why it's any less loved than Conundrum or Challenger or forbid Cameron. I think I don't know why I've like got this irrational hate of it's like when Jon Stewart just
You
hated
dude.
Arby's for like a year. Um but
This this is one
yeah,
of your hot takes is going against camera now.
yeah, this is devolving into just crapping on a peak, but North Massive is much more difficult than Massive itself is. And I think it's
Mm.
14,340. I
It's
hiked it.
337. Yep.
Yeah. So I hiked the entire Massive Massif. So Massive Green, South Massive, Middle Massive,
Hmm.
the True Summit, and the North Massive. They were all melted off, had no snow on them. This was late July. I get to North Massive, it had a ton of snow on it. And it
Mm.
required, I would argue at that point, with snow, class three climbing over snow and ice to reach the summit. In terms of effortculty, it was much more difficult. I don't know why it hasn't gotten enough love. And I think you're making a good argument for naming the darn thing. I mean, if that's what it takes, I, gosh, there's so many interesting people, and it could have a Ute name. It can have an Arapaho name, like
Yeah.
it could take on a name of a great hiker or climber. It could take on the name of someone from Colorado, like John Denver. We could just call it Hunter for Hunter Frying Pan. We could call it the Frying Pan Peak. I don't know,
Mm.
but that all begs for its inclusion in these kinds of bigger lists. And I think it's hike worthy. I would feel like, yeah, if you're going to include Cameron and all those other ones, I think North Massive slash John Denver Peak, let's get the petition going, should be in the conversation for sure. And it just shows how, on some level, like I know why people really stick to the 53 or 54 14ers that are ranked and have enough prominence.
Hmm. Yep.
That makes perfect sense. But if you're aiming for the 58 that includes some of these unrankedes, then yeah, then North Massive's got to be on there too.
It makes sense. And it's confounding that it would be that kind of a criteria. It almost seems arbitrary to me that that kind of a criteria would be the difference between everyone counting it and nobody counting it, or at least like only the hardcore folks counting it. It's just, I'm confused.
And when you're confused, we're all confused, Eric. You're a logical dude.
Oh no, we're all in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I like that. So maybe that should be our goal for the new year, Eric, as we transition into talking about our resolutions. We're going to start a petition to get North Massive named. We just have to come up. So maybe you guys want to email us. Let's find a name that's not like Mountain McMountain Face or something like that. And let's
Oh,
do it.
don't pose that as a possibility, Zach. Don't.
Yeah,
You're
didn't they
gonna
name a train
you're
in
gonna be.
England?
It was there was at least a boat that was named Bodie McBoatface. There may have
Yeah,
been a train too, but
yeah.
yep.
Let's not do that, guys. Let's grow up a
Nope.
little bit,
Let's
but
not go down that
um
path.
let's let's get on it. USGS. Yeah, it's the high point in a wilderness area too.
Mm-hmm.
It needs some more love. It's a beautiful peak, and the valley below it's gorgeous. So, I also think that takes us to our New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
We are on the precipice of 2025. This is the time where we make where some people make resolutions. I usually don't because I realize that I'm going to probably give up on them
Yeah.
right
I'm
away.
gonna
But
fail.
most hikers are goal setters. And I think you and I both tend to fall into that category. We're both in our late 40s now. So goal setting is important if we are to accomplish the things we want to do while our bodies still want to do them.
Indeed.
So, Eric, I'm excited to hear what are your New Year's resolutions for 2025?
So I've got three of them, and maybe even four now if we're gonna push to rename North Massive, but I won't include that here. So one of my goals is to summit 20 different mountains this summer. So that was kind of my goal last summer. I fell a tiny bit short of that, but I still got to experience a lot of great views, a lot of fun hikes, and I think it's a fair goal for someone that lives in Colorado that has the luxury, unlike my poor partner here, who does not get to just on a whim go to any 13er he wants to before the permits hit. But yeah, I think 20. I was thinking about what the number would be that would be appropriate. I think 20 feels fair. I've got kind of a preliminary list that has about 20. I'll probably refine it as the year goes on, but I think that's one that I'm going to try and tackle.
What number are you at right now?
So 36 14ers, and I think it's 22 or 23 13ers. I'll have to check again.
Okay,
So,
so back of the envelope math, you're at 58 or 59, right?
mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, you got to do 21, Eric. So it puts you at a nice round number, puts you at
Round
80,
80.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
Man, that's got a little bit more pepper to it than
It
78 or
it
79, right?
does.
Yeah.
Yep. And then I get to explain, why did you pick a weird number like 22? And I get to say, well, that's because I want to end at a round number like 80. So I like it, Z. I'm gonna try and refine my list and get it up there just a teeny bit. So
Yeah, pump up those numbers.
that's right. So that's one of mine. What do you got for one of yours for 2025, Zach?
Well, I have a similar one, so that's a good segue. My goal every year is to do 15
Mm,
individual summits. So not repeats, 15 unique,
unique. Yeah.
non-repeated, not one where I like go walk back over it again on the in and out. Oh man, I wish I hadn't told you that. So my count right now is sitting at 169
Okay.
13ers and 14ers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was going to say 15 because 15 puts me at 184, but I mean, it should be 16 though, right? That puts me at 185
Mm-hmm.
and then if I do another 15, that puts me at 200. The most I've ever done in a year is 15 though. I would have done it this year, but had some family stuff. People got sick.
Yep.
So I'll say 16. Let's be ambitious. 16 unique summits. They're getting harder for me because I've done all the easy 3 and 4 baggers. Actually,
Groups.
I've got
Yep.
one still wait. I've got a couple of those that I can still knock out. But yeah, and for me, that doesn't just mean 16 peaks. That means probably 4 or 5 trips to Colorado, and it means a certain level of fitness
Mm-hmm.
where I'm able to come up from basically sea level and hike those in the way that I want to hike them and feel good about it. So there's other goals that kind of fall under that, but let's just say 15 or 16 for, quit being wishy-washy. 16 peaks for this year.
16. All right, I'm writing it down. I'm holding you to it. If you don't do it, then I'm going to give you a hard time in 2026. But
Let's
no, I
coordinate. Let's
won't.
do your 21st and my 16th on the same day.
Ooh, I
You know,
like that.
I like that too. Let's
That's
try to like work up and then like hold it until like mid-August and then just go knock out like 3 or 4 in a day.
I
That'll be
like
fun.
it. So you don't have that many groups of 3 or 4 left. Do you know? I think you've mentioned before. One of them is actually the Santa Fe Peak group that Ty and I did earlier. You said you haven't done those, right? Santa Fe,
Haven't done
Geneva.
those. And then I guess here's my second resolution. Another one that I really want to do, another kind of big day, is to do Mount of the Holy Cross, Holy Cross Ridge,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Notch Mountain, and then the unnamed 13,327 peak as a loop and knock all those out in a day. I was going to do that this past year. That's 4 peaks in a day. I think that would be a fun day. I haven't done Holy Cross. I've hiked a bunch of those passes, like
Mm-hmm.
Missouri Pass and Fancy Pass a few times, but I haven't done those peaks. So that's my second resolution is to be able to do that. And again, do it and do it well, not like struggle bus it, but like get up, go hard and feel really good at the end of it. So that's my second resolution. So thank you for the very intelligent segue there, Eric.
It was it was dumb luck from me as always. But so that's quite ambitious there. So when you mentioned you're throwing a 14er in there. Holy Cross, is that's not from Half Moon, right?
That's
Or
from, so you start at the same trailhead as the standard route,
okay, that is
but
Half
then
Moon then.
yeah, it's Half Moon, and then you could do the loop either direction. There's the standard route, which where you lose like 1,000 feet kind of in the
Exactly.
beginning, and then you have to
Yep.
regain it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking that that's how I would start it,
Mm-hmm.
and then get
I
to
would.
Holy Cross, and then I'm essentially descending for the rest of the trip from
Exactly.
Holy Cross to Holy Cross Ridge, which is a centennial, and then descending down to 13,327, and then to Notch Mountain, and then home free. So
Yep.
that's how I was thinking about it. But if any listeners have done that, you guys can write us and tell me the better way. That's my intuition is to do it that way, where I put in the most effort up front
Mm-hmm.
and not save the hardest part for the end.
That makes the most sense to me. I mean, Travis and I summited my buddy Travis, Holy Cross many years ago, and it's 16 miles round trip if you go out and back. You're
Yeah.
talking about the loop,
And this
obviously, but
only adds another, I think, mile.
okay.
Um,
But you're not regaining at the end, like you said. You
that's right.
that 1,000 foot regain at the end. A lot of people think that's a killer. I thought it was inconvenient. I didn't like it, but most trip reports that I've read have just completely rued that very end where you have to reascend. So I think what you're saying is really smart, and I think that would be a great way to do it. And if that gets you to your 185th and my 80th on the same day, hey, that I'd be up for that if you wanted a hiking partner for that trip.
Yeah, now we're talking, brother. Now I'm doing the Jack Black Eyes from School of Rock. Like something's wrong. Yes, I love it.
Math, 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 math,
Math
math.
is a wonderful thing. All right, Eric. So that's my second resolution. What's your second?
So my second, so when I think through mountains that have turned me away in the past, there
Mm,
haven't been a ton. There's been a few, but in general, I've had a chance to reascend them later on. One of those was Columbia. You kind of saved me on that one. I had a bad experience on that, which we've talked about, and then I think a year or two later, you said, "Well, let's knock this out. You and I'll take this on," and we got it. So there was a peak that turned me around earlier this summer, and it is good old Pacific Peak. And
yeah.
I would love to give that sucker another go this coming summer. So my second resolution is to try to tackle Pacific Peak. I might not try to tackle it from the same aspect that I was considering this summer, but regardless, I would like to get to that summit because it's a very, very, very high centennial and it's not too shy of being a 14er actually. And it just looked really cool up there. You could get a really cool view of the Pacific Tarn, which I think is the highest named lake in the country, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken. So Pacific has a lot of allure to me, and I missed it. So that's going to be a goal of mine this year is to try and get that one.
Oh man, now you're adding to my list because the theme of peaks that have thwarted you, North Apostle. Uh,
Ah,
I got
man.
really far up that. I got to the saddle between the two apostles. I mean, I did all the hard work and just a nasty storm rolled in. It was
Mm.
the clouds were like brewing and I descended like once I got 100 feet below the saddle, there was like a thunder crack, and I was like, oh, thank God I just got off that. So I don't know if that's going to be a resolution, but I need redemption on that one. So um, that's good. Do you have a third? You said you had three, Eric. Let's hear it.
I do have a third one. This may be a little bit of a funky one, but I know you have some good experience in the Gore range. And I am very, very intrigued by, based on what you've talked about and what some trip reports I've read about the Gore range in general.
Mm.
I want to give that a shot. I want to try and look at a 13er in the Gore range. And I think some of the easier ones I've seen Jacques Peak, I think.
Jacques
Um,
Peak is near Copper Mountain. Yeah, that's
mhm.
that's probably the easiest because it kind of broken up by I-70.
Okay.
So
So,
yeah, you've seen Jacques and which other ones?
I think that's the one that I wrote down on my list. There was another one that I had on my spreadsheet that I wrote down a couple nights ago, and I forget what it was. But Jacques stood out to me as being a class two doable one for
Hmm.
a guy that doesn't have any gore experience and is intrigued by the gores. So, regardless of which one it is, I would like to tackle the Gore 13er this summer. So, that's on my list too.
I would add for you Red Peak.
Now, Red Peak was the other one. That's it. It was
Yeah,
Jacques and Red.
Red Peak and then Vista Point and Mount Solitude. Those are classics for me. They're not like Zodiac Ridge classic, like that's the classic Gore Range hike, and
Okay.
those are pretty gnarly looking. But Mount Solitude and Vista Point, really great peaks, and there's a way to do those. We can't talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
um, but those are fantastic peaks. And there's a few others that are doable for guys like us. So I love that. Yeah, the Gore is fun. The Gore's wild. That's a real wilderness. That's great take. That's a great resolution.
Wild. So am I going to get out there and try and I'm going to see like all these peaks with lampshades on their heads? Is that what I'm going to find if the gores are that wild?
Not talking heads wild, more like Mad Hatter wild. Like
Oh no.
there's so many mushrooms in the Gore.
Really?
Yeah, I
Oh.
mean, not the kind, not even remotely the kind you would want to even like look at, but they're like the bright red toadstools, and it's wet there. It rains a lot. The only time I've seen bears in Colorado, I've seen them in the Gore.
Oh wow.
Um, there's big, mountainsides with berry patches on them, and once you get about 3 miles in, there's not many people in parts of the Gore. Heck,
Oh
there's not
yeah.
even trails in big parts of it. So
Yeah, I'm sure.
that is a noteworthy goal. I like that.
Okay, cool.
I haven't done Red Peak. I'll do Red Peak with you. So
Maybe that could be 80 for me, 185 for you if that would be
no, no, what we're
harder to
gonna
nail
do,
those
Eric,
numbers.
we're gonna do Red Peak, and then we're gonna go like eat at Mr. Crepe or whatever your favorite place is, and
Oh yeah. Or go to
we're,
Breck.
we're gonna carbo load, and then we're gonna go hit the five peaks of the Holy Cross the next day.
Yeah, there it
And
is.
big weekend in August. Let's
There it
do it.
is. I'm in. I am fully in. All right, Z. Well, it sounds like I had three and you have three. What's your third resolution or goal?
I did it this past year. I really need to do it again. I got back into backpacking and
Yeah.
loved it, and it felt really good. You and I have maybe talked about a backpack up Cataract Gulch in San Juan's. I got my eyes on that one. I've got my eyes on a backpacking trip in the Lagaritas.
Mm.
And because I'm a masochist, I've got my eyes on a couple backpacking trips in the Sangres too that I'd like to do. I'm not sure why I always want to do that. I think I'm reducing the approach for the next day, but it really just means I'm carrying a pack up a really steep trail.
Carrying a lot more for a short distance. Yeah.
Yeah. But as the year has gone on, I'm sure a lot of people identify with this, but as my year has gone on, I keep coming back in my head to my backpacking trips.
There you go.
And they were solo, so just being alone in the woods and that feeling of solitude and the I need to do that again. I'd forgotten how good that was. So I will be doing that, and that's part of my Christmas list is my family getting me some lighter gear because everything I had weighed too much. But yeah, that's my resolution. And again, with that goes, I better be in shape
Oh
because
yeah.
carrying
Oh
a
yeah.
pack is not easy business. So got to be in good shape. And I've got other goals related to that stuff, but those are my three hiking related resolutions this year.
I love it. And that's fantastic. Of backpacking, I missed out on it this past summer, but I've done it with family the previous few summers, and it's just a blast. And I've never actually summited a 13 or higher on a backpacking trip. So I think that's a sweet goal. I might make that like a 3B or something on my
Let's do
list.
a let's what do you do it when you tie pinkies? Are we do
Oh, like
a
a pinky swear?
let's do a pinky swear to do a backpacking trip for let's do the San Juan one. We can go up there and that is a multi-bagger. We could go do half peak and quarter
Hmm.
peak and some of the 13ers around there. We can regale each other with stories in evening time. We can eat dehydrated food, Eric. It'll be
Oh
great.
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm in.
All right.
100% in.
Better bring a big bag of trail mix, brother.
Yes. Costco, look out.
Yeah. Eric, what food did you bring? Trail mix.
Here it is.
Do
Yeah.
you have dinner? Yes, trail mix.
It's trail
Do
mix.
you have
Yeah.
snacks? Trail mix. Do
Yeah.
you have breakfast? Trail mix.
I have a 35-pound pack and 24 pounds of it is trail mix. So here it
24
is.
pounds of almonds and nuts.
That's right.
Uh, that is good. Well, I am looking forward to this new year. I love your goals, and they've inspired me to make more goals. So,
Well, there you go. Well, Zach, your goals, they were a ton of fun to listen to as well. Hopefully we can each make some progress on those and even together on some of our summer hikes coming up in 2025. Zach, if any of our listeners want to share their resolutions, we would love to hear from them. Where can they reach us?
well, as a number of people have at greens and blues podcast at gmail.com, at our
Indeed.
Facebook page,
Hmm.
the Greens and Blues podcast. I am on X at NM Hiker Person. I'm also decided to maybe migrate over to Blue Sky along with everybody else because my Twitter feed has become a cesspool of people getting run over by cars and horrible things I want to unsee. I think other people's feeds are solely political, but mine has become just like a bunch of crash videos and things, and I hate it. So you can find me at Zach Simpson Blue Sky. I was able to get my real name on something for once.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Yes, early adopter. It's like when I got a Friendster account. Um, so
You did not just make a Friendster reference.
I think I was the first like Zach Simpson on Friendster. So
Oh my gosh, that's
uh,
great.
that's the death nail for a social media platform is when I adopt it. But yes, if you guys want to reach us with your resolutions or advice on our resolutions or trail mix donations, those are the places to reach us.
I love it. Oh, well, everyone, thanks for listening as always, and we'll catch you next time.